And we're live. Welcome back to today's National Weather Forecast. Just taking a quick look at the warnings map, you can see we've got a lot to talk about today. We've got winter storm warnings in California stretching up into the Midwest. We've got the red flag warning stretching from New Mexico all the way up into Iowa, so there's a wildfire threat there. And then behind that wildfire threat, we're actually going to have another winter storm building in right here, possibly bringing 2 to 3 feet of snow to some locations. So lots to talk about today. If you're only interested in one of these stories, as always, you can go down in the comments below where I put the timestamps and you'll be able to just click directly to one of these regions. But overall, there's a lot to talk about. This certainly looks different than the maps last week where there was almost no warnings whatsoever. Now we've got these winter storm warnings stretching through California all the way from the Oregon border down to the Mexico border. Another foot of snow expected to fall there. Then, actually, part of the system that moved through California a couple days ago, you can see is now working its way up into the Midwest. Where that snow and winter storms actually falls is going to depend on where we still have those 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures that are still over the Midwest. And then right here, you can see that wildfire threat stretching all the way from New Mexico to Iowa. We're going to look at what locations appear to be in the worst fire danger with that one. So if you want to see that another way, one, you can think of those 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures up here in the Midwest due to this giant ridge that is over the region. Then that storm that's going up there is actually right over Utah. It moved through California, and you can watch that little bump right there move up into the Midwest. That's what's causing those winter storm warnings up there. And then what's following behind that is this large cutoff low that's going to be continuing to fill in over California for the next couple of days. I think the bulk of this storm is behind us, unless you're maybe down in Southern California. It looks like the majority of the storm is still to come down there, especially some of the stronger winds. And then that's what's going to be moving off into the center of the country. It's a very interesting weather map to see here where it almost looks like a giant ridge, but then this huge cutoff low in the center of the country. That, I think, is actually the top story for today, as that brings in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to have locations in Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas that are getting multiple inches of rain. Slight risk for some severe weather, some thunderstorms, possibly some hail and lightning. And then on the other side of this low, we're bringing down that cold air, mixing with that same moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and places in Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming, getting over a foot of snow. I would say models are looking pretty confident you're getting over a foot of snow there. And then there's the possibility in some locations to be getting 2 or 3 feet of snow. Then eventually, we're going to follow that storm as it moves all the way up into the Midwest and see what it does once it moves up there. Seeing all that another way, you can take a look at the precipitation that's expected across the country. There's that first storm going into the Midwest. One thing you'll notice is that places as far north as upper Wisconsin and upper Michigan are actually getting rain with that. And again, that's because of that large ridge we were just looking at, where that's causing some 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures as far north as northern Wisconsin. Where we are getting some snow, though, is right there in Minnesota. Then you'll also see on the left side of the screen some of that rain and snow continuing to build into California as that low pushes through the state, spreads out that precipitation, and then eventually moves into the center of the country. And this is when I think the big story for the rest of this week starts to form. This is around Friday into Saturday. You'll notice the first little traces of snow and rain showing up in parts of Wyoming and Kansas, and then you're going to see this storm just get stronger and stronger as we continue through the weekend. At this point, it's pulling in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. You can almost think of the moisture as following those little path lines through the isobars right there. And then at the same time, it's pulling cold air down. So that's going to cause, as you can see, heavy snowfall throughout places like Wyoming, Nebraska, Colorado, and then heavy rain through places like Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, before eventually that storm moves off and it almost looks like it just disappears. It continues to bring some heavy rain to the southeast, But the overall snowfall forecast, once it gets up to places like Wisconsin and Michigan, that's a big change in the models there, not looking as strong as originally was forecasted. So if we take a look at the quick snapshot of what precipitation is going to be coming in over the next week, we'll look at the snowfall in a second. So just right here, think about the California coast. That's where some of our rain's going to be. Looks like we're getting over an inch of rain on addition to what's already fallen. So that's some good news there when it comes to the drought and fire danger in California. And then we've got that heavy rain here in Kansas, Missouri. That's about 3 to 4, possibly even 5 inches of rain there. Again, that might be accompanied by some hail, some lightning, some severe weather. Right now, the National Weather Service has it as a slight risk for severe weather. And then later in the forecast, that's when that heavy rain starts spreading out into the southeast, start to get an inch or two built up throughout Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. And then when we look at the snowfall, there's that first bit that goes up through Minnesota. You'll notice Wisconsin almost completely out of it. And again, that's because of those 30-degree above average temperatures, which I'll show in just a second. So we've got that strip. We've got possibly another foot of snow building into the Sierras, and then even building all the way down into Southern California before that system. Remember, it turns into that giant cutoff low and then moves into the center of the country. That's when the top story for today happens. That's where Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming, South Dakota have this large bullseye of snow where that's for sure over a foot, and then where you start to see that orange color, that's where you could get up to 2 to 3 feet. And what's interesting about this is the area where we're expecting the largest amount of snowfall seems to be creeping up farther north in each model run. So Colorado actually expecting a little bit less than yesterday's forecast, but still expected to get over 1.5 feet. So if you like winter storms and snow, that'll be good news for you. If you don't like winter storms, that's not going to be the best news for you. So with that first bit of snow that goes up into the Midwest, the reason it's not very widespread, and the reason most of the Midwest is actually getting rainfall, is because of these 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures. This shows temperature anomalies, and you can see that warm air right over the Midwest. This is right about when that storm is coming through, and you can see large portions of Wisconsin and Michigan are 30 degrees above average. That's why with that first storm, the one that's going to be coming through in the next couple of days, that's mostly just going to be bringing snow to Minnesota, rain for the rest of the Midwest. Now the other thing that's causing, you can see how far these above average temperatures stretch down. They're actually stretching all the way down into Texas. Maybe not as extreme as up there in the far Midwest, but still 15 to 20 degrees above average down in Texas, working into Kansas. Now the reason that's important is because it's causing this red flag warning and that wildfire threat that we have throughout New Mexico all the way up into Iowa. And it's actually a combination of the two factors going on. It's a combination of these well above average temperatures stretching all the way down into Texas, and it's also due to that cutoff low, we could show it right here, that is working its way into this region. As it works its way in, you can see how close those isobars are. That's going to be causing some strong winds. So the strong winds combined with those well above average temperatures are why we have that wildfire threat right there, even though it's the middle of March and we simultaneously have some winter storm threats going on. So again, excuse me, the temperatures are well above average throughout this region, and you can see how warm it actually is going to be. As we look at this afternoon, large portions of Texas into Oklahoma, Kansas, all the way stretching up into Iowa are in the mid 70s to possibly even 80s in some places. So while areas in the west coast and northwest appear to be below freezing, that's where we're able to get that snowfall in the Sierras, some of that snow building into Wyoming and Colorado where you see the blue color, that's where we're below freezing. But where we have that red flag warning, you can see there's a large strip of the country that is in the mid 70s to even working up into the 80s. And that's going to be sticking around for the next couple of days until that storm really builds in there. Once it builds in there, we're going to start bringing in some moisture, so then that wildfire threat should disappear. So there's the warm temperatures. The big aspect of this, though, is as that cutoff low starts to move into the center of the country, it's bringing those extreme wind gusts with it. Right there, you can see it's already started, and it's going to be continuing throughout the day today. You can see working from New Mexico all the way up into Iowa. There are periods where you have 35 to 45, even 55 mile per hour wind gusts. So that's part of the fire danger. Warm air, these wind gusts of 35 to 45 miles per hour that seem to be sticking around, especially in New Mexico, even on Thursday. So we got warm air, extreme winds. It's also currently dry. That might sound weird considering there's a storm on the way, but looking at the humidity right now, there is this area throughout New Mexico, Texas, working into Colorado and Kansas and Oklahoma, where we have that dry air. So eventually, once that storm moves in, you're going to see moisture move into the region. So that will likely help with the wildfire threat in the extended forecast. But for today, that dry air is over the region, and then working into tomorrow even, New Mexico still seems to be in that dry air. So the reason that dry air is important is because if the air is dry, the fuels get dry, and then it's easier to start a fire. If you've ever tried to start a campfire with a dry log or a wet log, it's pretty obvious which one is easier to start and then which one is going to burn faster and hotter. It's the dry fuels. So looking at the fuels right now, you can see there are large portions of especially New Mexico working into Texas, right where we have that fire threat here in Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado. That's where the fuels already are dry. And then with this continued dry air that we're going to have over the next 2 days in that same region, that's just going to continue to dry out these fuels. So it's really a combination of what have we thought about so far? The warm temperatures in the mid 70s, wind gusts 45 miles per hour at some points. We've got dry fuels because of that low humidity. And then on top of that, we also have some areas, especially here in Colorado and New Mexico, that are in extreme to severe, even exceptional drought in some places. So that's all the kinds of different factors that go into a fire danger forecast. Temperature, winds, humidity, fuel moisture, and the drought. And you can see a lot of those factors are combining in relatively the exact same region. So I would say the key spots to look out for when it comes to this red flag warning and the fire danger threat is up here. Actually, throughout most of New Mexico was looking pretty dry. Down here in the very southeastern part of Colorado, and then northern parts of Texas and Oklahoma. I'd say that's the key spot to look out for right there. One just interesting thing, it's going to be a little bit of a tangent, but notice how there's less of a fire threat as you dip down into New Mexico. That actually perfectly follows the fuel moisture map, where you have some of those fuels that have more moisture. There, we don't have that fire danger threat. So that's just a perfect little example of how all these factors work together to create your fire danger. And you can see that this map actually has it stretching all the way up into Iowa, and I believe the main reason for that is that's one of the locations where the wind gusts are going to be the strongest, getting up to 45 to 55 miles per hour. Well, you can see that wind warning continues for what looks to be most of the Midwest. Less of a fire threat up there, but still has that high wind warning. So that's the fire danger threat. I think now that we're on the warnings map, it could be a good time to just start diving into our individual regions. I think the first place we should go into is California, because the storm is already over California, and then it's going to be moving into the center of the country, causing all of this wildfire threat, and then eventually what I think will be some major winter storm warnings for Colorado and Nebraska as we start to build in a foot or 2 feet of snow, and then eventually we'll follow that storm as it moves all the way up into the Midwest. But first, we'll just look at California, where you can see those winter storm warnings stretching all the way from the Oregon border down to the Mexico border. So looking at that on the 500 millibar pattern map, you can see this rather large trough just filling in, and then it's almost going to turn into a cutoff low pressure system as this system moves down over Southern California. Now, one thing I'll say about this is it's very important to look at what the isobars look like. So right here you see these isobars, the lines of constant pressure are relatively far apart. That's why throughout the rest of the day today and tomorrow, we're just going to have some light rain and some light snow throughout much of California. But where these isobars get closer together, that's where the winds are going to be stronger. That's where we're going to be pushing in more moisture. There's more energy. So down there in Southern California, that's where I'm expecting a little bit more rain and then even some stronger wind gusts as well. And then eventually that's going to work its way down and out of California. But you'll notice how slow moving it is. Occasionally we'll have a storm that just comes in and out of the state in about 24 hours. That one appears to be slowly moving across the state, and it's not totally gone until Saturday and Sunday. So looking at the precipitation, the majority of it came in last night and throughout this morning for northern parts of California, and then you're going to see the heavy precipitation start to shift down to Southern California as we get into the day Thursday. We'll still get some light rain, some light snow throughout the central coast and the Sierras on Thursday, but for the most part, it just continues down there in Southern California. And then you'll also notice that precipitation spreads out. We'll go back to the beginning here. Spreads out into the rest of the region as well. Drops that snow into Nevada, Utah, parts of Arizona. And then it's just light snow. There's no periods where it looks extreme or anything like that. But it's good to see it's widespread because the drought in this area is also widespread. Now, one thing I will point out here is that shows a pretty good image of what this was doing last night and in the overnight hours. There were some areas where we had some rather heavy rainfall. There was some convection. There was a couple of cracks of thunder up here in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I'm a fan of I'm a fan of wild weather, so it was interesting to see some of those or hear some of those cracks of thunder last night and throughout the overnight hours. That, for the most part, is gone though. As we get into today, we're still going to get some light rain and some light snow, but then it's just going to continue to ease up as we click farther out into the forecast. So looking at the overall precipitation, ignore Nevada, Utah, and most of Arizona for this map because we'll look at the snowfall map in a second, and that is mostly snowfall. For this, you can see what rain is still expected to come. You can see maybe 0.1 to half an inch more of rain up here in the North Bay. And then as you get down to the South Bay through the Central Coast, that's where we're expected to pick up another inch. And then down there in Southern California, where remember the stronger part of this system seemed to be located, where those isobars are closer together, we're funneling in more moisture, there's a bit more energy. That's where we're still expected to get another inch to an inch and a half. So then looking at the snowfall forecast, this is going to be more widespread. You can see it gets into Nevada, Utah, Arizona. Most parts of Nevada getting 2 to 4 inches, parts of Utah getting maybe 4 to 6 inches, and then parts of Arizona, that one bullseye there, might be getting up to 8 to 10 inches. And then still to fall in the Sierras, on top of what we've already had, looks like we're getting another foot throughout the Sierras. So even though it looks like it's just some light snow, it's going to be continuing for the next day or two. So we're able to actually pick up another foot. And then down there in Southern California, you can see that's actually the bullseye that appears to be picking up the most over the next 48 hours, where, again, the majority of that storm energy was located. So let's just look at Northern California real quick. We'll go to right about now. You can see still light rain, some light snow in the Sierras, and then that's going to continue throughout the day today. It's going to be a bit more scattered, but we will have some isolated regions where we start to get moderate rainfall and moderate snowfall. Again, not really an extreme storm by any standards. Not seeing any of those. When it's a really strong storm, you'll see some rain in this yellow to orange color. We actually did see a little of that last night when that thunder was going through the Santa Cruz Mountains. And then the snow, when that's extreme, you'll see this purple color. But right there, for the most part, it looks like the bulk of this storm is already behind us in Northern California. We might continue to get some scattered light rain and snow as we get into Thursday, but for the most part, the bulk of this storm is behind us. So looking at what we will continue to get, it's still something though. Especially throughout the day today, you saw that light rain continue. So parts of the North Bay will be able to pick up another half an inch. San Francisco might pick up a full another inch. Down here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, I'm thinking we'll get another 2 inches. And then throughout the valley, about a half an inch as well. So even though it's light rain, it's falling enough today that we're able to add another half inch to an inch onto the totals that we've already gotten. So again, that's great news when it comes to the drought in California and for future fire danger. Especially great to see some of that rain building into the North Bay, where I'm always concerned about fire danger in that location. When it comes to the snowfall in Northern California, you can see we're expected to pick up almost another foot. It looks like it's safe to say another 8 to 10 inches. Some locations should be seeing another foot with that light snow that'll be continuing throughout the day today and working into Thursday. So again, I just want to show this map again because it perfectly shows what's going on and why Southern California is actually expected to get more of this storm. One reason, the storm itself is moving from north to south for the most part, but it also has to do with this energy here. So you can see that energy is much stronger down here in Southern California, and it's right where those isobars are closer together. Up here in NorCal, it's about as far apart as you're ever going to see those isobars, and you notice we don't have all that much storm energy throughout the day today. Down in Southern California, that's where that energy is being funneled, so that's why Southern California is still expecting more rain and some more of those wind gusts that we've been seeing. So as we click in here, again, 4 a.m. this morning, some of that heavier rain and snow started to show up in Southern California. As we get into 10 a.m., it's going to continue parts of very Southern California, working into San Diego. We'll start to see that more moderate rainfall. And then you'll notice it just continues all the way in to Friday night, maybe even some scattered showers very early Saturday morning. And one thing to notice is that especially down here in Southern California, where again, all that moisture was being funneled, that's where we don't really see extreme rain. Like that's some strong rain up there that we had last night along the central coast and down in the Santa Cruz Mountains. Down here, it doesn't look like it's all that strong at any one point, but you'll notice it starts at about 10 p.m. last night, and it's going to continue, especially from Los Angeles down into San Diego, all the way until about 10 a.m. on Saturday. So even though there's no periods where it looks like it's extreme rain or extreme snowfall, we're able to pick up that rain and snow for such a long period of time that our totals end up being pretty good. Now, good is kind of a point of view. For some people, they don't like winter weather or rain, or they see warnings, and it's obviously warnings for the most part aren't good. But my main concern is the drought and wildfire. So when it comes to this inch of rain building in along the central coast and this inch to an inch and a half of rain building into Southern California, I would consider it good. Especially here in Los Angeles, where we're picking up another inch of rain, and then down here in San Diego, where there's the chance to get an inch to maybe even 2 inches of rain throughout that same location where, again, we were just seeing that rainfall continue to fall for a long period of time. Then when it comes to the snowfall, that's actually the one part of the state that we're expecting to pick up over 1.5 to possibly even 2 feet of snow in that one little tiny bullseye right there. That'll be, I think, going forward, the part of the state that picks up the most snow going forward. Part of that is because the Sierras have already picked up a large amount of their snow, especially last night into this morning. And then again, that energy is shifting down into Southern California, so I think a lot of moisture is going to be flowing into this region. Now, the other part of that energy is what's going on with the wind gusts. You might have felt them last night and into this morning, where we had some 20 to 30 mile per hour gusts. Well, as we get into the day today, some of those wind gusts are actually going to kick back up again. San Diego, 30 miles per hour, Los Angeles, 30 miles per hour, and then a little bit farther inland, we could get to some of those 40 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts. Good news is those will be easing up as we get into the day Thursday and Friday. As that storm energy eases up, the wind gusts should as well. So again, that's all due to those tight isobars as that system works its way through, and then by about Thursday, and then especially by this weekend, that system is gone. So where it goes after that is the middle of the country. And before it moves officially into the middle of the country, that's where it's bringing those extreme winds to New Mexico, Texas, into Kansas, all the way up into Iowa, where we're 40 to 45 degrees above average temperature, or 45 mile per hour wind gusts. I got confused there because also up in Iowa we have some 35 to 45 mile per hour, or 35 to 45 degree above average temperatures. Man, there's lots of 35s and 45s. Mile per hour wind gusts and temperatures above average up here in Iowa. Man, that was wordy. Okay, so as that system continues to flow in to the center of the country, so again, first it brings the wind gusts, which brings the fire threat. Then after that is when it starts to bring in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, pull down some cold air from Montana and Canada, and that's where we start to get heavy rain, where we have that warm, moist air flowing in throughout Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, and then heavy snow, where we're pulling that cold air in to combine with that moisture. And then eventually that moves off, and it looks like we might have a little something following in behind that, but there's enough to talk about today that we're not going to spend too much time on that. So seeing it another way, one, I forgot to mention, there is one little bump in this trough. You notice it right there going through Colorado that will be going throughout the day today. Not purposely not spending much time on that because the big story is obviously this giant cutoff low that's going to be forming as we get into Friday and Saturday. That one little bump though is starting to bring some snow to Colorado, Wyoming, and then you see that's going to stretch up into the Midwest. What we're really thinking about though is what happens as that storm moves into the center of the country, and then you start to see that widespread snow where we're pulling the cold air down, and then the widespread heavy rain where we're pulling the moisture in. So where we have that snow, there are some places that are expected to pick up over a foot and a half, some locations even showing 2 to 3 feet. And then where we have the heavy rain, that's where there's a slight risk for severe weather. We could get some hail, some lightning, possibly some flooding. Keeping my eye on the warnings map there, and you can see how long this appears to last. The snow is first starting to show up around Friday, some of that rain starting to show up as well, and then it combines into one strong system throughout Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, continues to drop that heavy rain and heavy snow, and then finally moves off as we get into Monday and Tuesday. So before all that precipitation moves in though, again, the first part of this system are the extreme wind gusts that are coming in throughout New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, all the way up into Iowa. That's where we're getting 35 to even 55, possibly even 60 mile per hour wind gusts. And again, I already covered the fire threat earlier in this video, so I'm not going to go over all of that again, but we're combining those wind gusts with warm temperatures in the mid 70s. We're combining it with low humidities around 10%, dry fuels, especially down here in New Mexico and the southeastern part of Colorado, working into Texas and Oklahoma. And then we're also combining it with drought. So that's why we have that fire threat in that region. And then luckily, those winds appear to be dying down as the system itself moves in. There's still going to be some strong winds here in New Mexico, but at that point, we're starting to pull in some moisture, so much of that wildfire threat should be gone. Looking at the precipitation closer, right there, Friday and Saturday, that's where you start to see it's almost like this system is widely rotating, and then it starts to just pull in closer and closer until it is one system, combined snow and heavy rain. Then that's officially formed as we get into Saturday and Sunday, and then you can see it doesn't just move out of the region, it sits over the region, dropping what looks to be the heaviest snowfall we've seen throughout this entire live stream into Nebraska throughout the day on Sunday, where that heavy rain is stretching in to parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, and you can think of this actually is a perfect graphic to show how this works. So this low pressure system there has counterclockwise circulation. So on the right side, that's where you can actually see this moisture being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico. Then at the top of this low and on the left side, that's where we're pulling some of that cold air down. Now where those combine is where we get the heaviest snowfall, because the moisture is being pulled in, and then once it hits that cold air, it's almost like squeezing a sponge, and all that moisture gets pulled or gets squeezed out directly over Nebraska, where it's colder in the form of snow, where it's warmer in the form of rain. And then let's watch as that continues to flow out of the region, still getting some light rain in Iowa all the way into Tuesday. So looking at the precipitation, the key spot to look at here will be throughout Kansas and Missouri. This is something that's been shifting around a bit throughout the forecast this week. If you've been following my forecast, it seems like this area of the strongest rainfall seems to be jumping around between Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Missouri. Right now, it looks like the central parts of Kansas and then into Missouri are areas that could be picking up 4 to 5 inches of rain within the next week. So there's no flood threats in place right now, but I'm certainly going to keep my eye out for them, because that's a lot of rain to be getting. And then again, with some of that going on right there, some of that heavy rain that you see piling in, that looks to be a rather strong storm, to put it lightly. That's where we could be getting there's a slight risk of severe weather, some lightning, some hail. So I'll be keeping my eye out for the severe weather threat along with the flood threat, because 4 to 5 inches of rain is just simply too much for your soils to be able to completely soak up. So then when it comes to the snowfall, this will paint a good picture of where that dividing line of where the heavy rain is going to be and where the heavy snow is going to be. You know, earlier in this video, I said that Colorado's snowfall forecast was decreased from yesterday, and I'm actually going to go back on that, because there is a large portion of the northeastern part of Colorado that is now fairly confidently saying that we're getting 2 feet of snow. That is certainly more than some of the earlier forecasts earlier this week. And then as we get into Wyoming and Nebraska, you can see there's places that are actually expected to get 2 to 3 feet of snow, possibly even more than 3 feet of snow. But again, it's that dividing line right there that is going to determine where you're getting over 1 foot to 2 feet of snow, or whether you're getting maybe 3 to 4 inches of rainfall. Seeing that another way, and I think the even better way to look at it. So before this system moves in, you can see how warm it is throughout much of this region. We're still in the mid 70s. That's when the extreme wind gusts are still showing up, and we still have some fire threat. Then as this low continues to move in, you're going to see it jump up above Kansas into Oklahoma, right about there. And I think that's a good place to zoom in so you can see how this works. Counterclockwise rotation around this low. Right there, you can see it actually pulling in some of that warm air. You can see it's warmer because it's that yellow color versus the green right there, pulling in that warm air, and that's what's going to allow the rainfall on this side. And then on this side, it's pulling down that cold air. So again, right through Nebraska. Remember, there was that strip we were looking at where the western part of the state was getting heavy snowfall, and then the eastern part of the state was getting heavy rainfall. This is a perfect snapshot of how that looks. You have that cold air being pulled down right here, so you're getting that heavy snow, and then you have that moisture and warm air being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico, which is why you have all that heavy rain. One other way to look at this is by looking at the humidity, and you can actually see that moisture being pulled in. If we go back, you might be able to see this even better. So at this point, you can see there's still large amounts of dry air throughout the region. It kind of looks scattered, but there is a lot of dry air. as that system strengthens and becomes stronger and really develops over the center of the country, you can see how the map changes. It's pulling all of this moisture, and this is now showing humidity, pulling it directly in right over Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, some of those same areas where we're seeing the largest snowfall totals and the largest rainfall totals. So right about there, I think that's a perfect graphic to show why this storm, in my opinion, is going to end up being a major storm. So major in two ways. Major in the rainfall way, if you're in that warmer temperatures. Major in the snowfall way, if you're in Colorado or Nebraska, where there's the colder temperatures and you're going to be getting snowfall. So I think the two bullseyes to look at, the two key spots would be Missouri for the rain, and then we'll look at Colorado for the snow. But first, looking at Missouri for that rain, there it starts to show up as early as Thursday. It looks like about Thursday at 12 a.m. we're already starting to get some of that heavy rain throughout Missouri. And then as we continue to click through, you'll notice that there's not really any breaks in the rainfall. It seems like every time I click this map, there's somewhere in Missouri that's still getting some rain. And then as we get into about 1 p.m. on Sunday, this is where I think the bulk of the storm will be. This is where it's officially formed, and this is the key spot and timing I'm going to be looking out for that severe weather threat. Right there, that's about 7 p.m. on Sunday, as you see that 0.2 to 0.5 inches of rainfall moving across the state almost like a wave. It starts over here and then moves across the state, and at that point, the soils are most likely already going to be saturated because, as you can see, we've already been picking up rainfall for a number of days. So by the time that very heavy rain comes in, a lot of our soils will already be saturated, which means they can't absorb any more of that rainfall. So that's why I'm going to be looking out for the flood threat in this region. And then also, that looks like a rather strong system. So that's where we could start to get some thunderstorms, some lightning, some hail as well in combination with that heavy rain. Looking at the rain though on this map, right there, you see it almost is just a gradual accumulation. Every time I click, there's a little bit more rain showing up in the state. And then throughout Sunday, when that strong rain comes in, that's where some of our totals start to get up into the 3 to 5 inch range, especially in southern parts of the state. And then where we have that snowfall, you can see it's actually already started as early as late last night. And that was with that first little, I want to call it like a blip in the system that goes through first. If we go back, you can actually see that. That snowfall that we started getting last night is that little bump right there in this overall trough that moves up into the Midwest. Now, after that, the real system piles in where that cutoff low forms. So let's see if we can find the map right there. So some of that snow, that's the first little system, but you'll notice that a lot of that light snow continues to fall even after that system's gone. We're still on the right side of a trough, so still picking up some light snow throughout this entire week. As we go through Wednesday, Thursday, even into Friday, still picking up some light snow. Now where the real system starts to come in is around Friday evening into Friday night. That's where the snow becomes a little bit more widespread and some areas look a little bit stronger. At this point though, this is just the storm starting to form and get stronger. Where we really start to see it kick up is as we get into the day Sunday. That's where we start getting 0.2 to 0.5 inches of snow falling per hour, and especially up here in northeastern Colorado. It's at this point, Saturday night into Sunday, when the storm has officially formed and we start to see those heavier snowfall rates. And then that's going to continue to drop some light snow throughout the day Sunday into Monday before it finally exits the region. So again, just to go back and emphasize the key part of that storm, it comes in, I would say, around 11 p.m. on Friday when that system's finally starting to form, the real system that we're talking about, that cutoff low. And then large amounts of snowfall throughout the day Saturday into Sunday. And I think Sunday is going to be the big day when it comes to that snowfall. So as I click through here, you'll notice every time I click this, it's almost like the rainfall map that we're looking at in Missouri. Every time I click, we're just continuing to add on to the totals. There's no periods in this point where it's very strong snowfall, but it's falling for a long period of time. So your overall totals before the real storm even comes in some areas you've already picked up a foot of snow. Throughout large portions of the western part of the state, you've picked up 6 to 8 inches of snow. And then once the real system comes in, this big storm, that's where, remember, it mostly was causing that heavy snowfall to go into the northeastern parts of the state. That's where you can see, as of right now, Colorado Springs expected to get 14 inches of snowfall. Parts of the northeast Colorado, that's where we're still getting 2 feet of snow, especially as we look into Denver. That's about 20 inches. Fort Collins, 24 inches. So this is something we're going to have to keep watching, but so far this week, the models have been fairly consistent in this forecast. This is actually a little bit more than was originally forecasted, but they are consistently showing large amounts of snowfall for northeast Colorado. So I would say it's a pretty safe bet that we're getting at least a foot of snow in this region, possibly even more. So that will most likely lead to some winter storm warnings for Colorado, most likely some flood warnings in parts of Missouri and Kansas associated with that rainfall. But that's actually not on the warnings map yet, as that's way off in the forecast into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. What is in the forecast, again right now, is that red flag warning, because before that system moves through, we're going to be having those extreme wind gusts out ahead of the storm. That's going to bring 35 to 45 mile per hour wind gusts, combination with 75 to 80 degree temperatures, relative humidity around 10%, fuel moistures extremely dry, and in some locations, severe drought. So that's why we have that red flag warning stretching all the way from New Mexico up into Iowa. The good news when it comes to the fire threat is once that storm starts moving in, we're going to start bringing in some moisture, so much of this fire threat will be gone. The bad news is it's going to lead to a large amount of snowfall, over 2 feet in some places, and a large amount of rainfall, over 5 inches in some places. So while the wildfire threat might be diminished as that storm comes in, we're most likely going to have some other things to talk about for the next week as the storm continues to develop. So just looking at that one other way, finally we'll just look at it. That storm settles in over the center of the country. That's the key spot we're going to be talking about for the next couple of days. But now let's actually shift our gaze up into the Midwest and see what's going on up there, because you can see as of right now there's already some winter storm warnings showing up in the Midwest. If you want to see where that's coming from, it's actually this overall trough and this little dip in the trough right there that you can see is just going to work its way up, going through Wyoming, South Dakota, and then up into the Midwest throughout the day today and into Thursday morning. So that's one system. That's what's causing those winter storm warnings as of right now. And we'll look at who's getting the snowfall with that. The big question mark there is who still has the 30 to 40 degree above average temperatures. Because if you're 40 degree above average temperatures, you're not going to be getting snow as that system goes through. Then behind that, there's the other system, the big story we're talking about today, the giant cutoff low that forms in the center of the country. Now, with regards to the Midwest, the key thing to think about here is that it's a very strange weather pattern. It almost looks like there's a giant ridge over the entire center of the country, and then there's just this one lone cutoff low pressure system. So what that means is that large portions of the Midwest are actually still going to be above average temperatures by the time this storm comes in. Now, once the storm comes in, it'll be able to pull some cold air down, but as it first comes in, the Midwest is going to still be warm because of this overall ridge. So that's going to affect who's getting snowfall as well. Seeing all that another way, there's that first system that goes through. You can see large portions of the Midwest, mostly in that rainfall because they're just too warm, 30 to 40 degrees above average. But we are getting some snow throughout South Dakota, into Minnesota, maybe some upper parts of Michigan. Then that larger system that forms, see, it turns into a major storm in the center of the country, and then it's going to move up into the Midwest. Now, what you'll notice there is it almost just dies the second it gets up into the Midwest, and I think the large reason for that has to do with that overall pattern that we're looking at there. It's so warm up here because of the overall ridge that when that storm gets up there, all that heavy snowfall that we were getting, and we are possibly going to be able to get through Minnesota and lower parts of Wisconsin, is just going to almost disappear as it moves farther into the Midwest, because it's just not going to be cold enough to be able to continue to pick up that snow. But again, before any of that precipitation moves in, you can see there already are some high wind warnings stretching throughout the Midwest. So that could actually be a good thing to look at first, because that's what's going on throughout the day today, working into tonight and even tomorrow morning. You can see parts of Iowa working into Illinois and Indiana, parts of Wisconsin, and then Michigan as we get into tomorrow morning, seeing 45 to even 55 mile per hour wind gusts. So that is pretty significant right there. That is some strong winds to have moving through your region. Now, let's see if those strong winds come in with the second system as well. Looks like Iowa is going to be getting some 50 mile per hour wind gusts with that second system. And then overall, not looking as strong as that first one that's bringing those high wind warnings throughout the day today and working into tomorrow morning. So again, with the precipitation, it's already started in some places. You're probably getting some light rain right now. And then as we click into this afternoon and this evening, that's where we get this dividing line where it's cold enough. That's where we're able to actually get some snow up here in northern parts of Minnesota. But then throughout much of the Midwest, including Wisconsin, just getting some rainfall. And I will say that there are some periods where it looks like some heavy rainfall. So I would say there's a slight risk for severe weather, possibly some thunderstorms, maybe some lightning and hail as that goes through. For the most part, though, I think the widespread impacts for that, Minnesota obviously getting some of that snow, but for most of the Midwest, you're just going to be feeling all that heavy rainfall that you see continuing all the way into Friday in some locations. Now, as this next system builds in, you'll notice it comes in almost like a wave. You can see it just rippling off into the Midwest. And when it first comes in, it's actually going to be able to drop some heavy snow into parts of Iowa and Minnesota, and then some heavy rain into Illinois and Indiana. But then again, because of that overall ridge pattern, as it continues to move through, it's just going to weaken and eventually just disappear. So looking at the snowfall totals that we're actually going to be getting, there's that first system. There you can see there's large strips of Minnesota that are getting 2 to 4 inches, possibly even 6 to 8 inches in some places. And then when that second system comes in, you notice it first drops some heavy snowfall into parts of Minnesota where we're getting our totals up over a foot by this time next week. And then also parts of Iowa where we briefly had that period of heavy snow, getting up to 4 to 6 inches there. And then starting to work into Wisconsin and northern parts of Illinois, but then the system just disappears. And you'll notice how different this looks from yesterday's forecast. Yesterday's forecast, it had this system taking more of a path directly into Michigan and pulling some cold air in from the northeast. So Michigan yesterday was showing 6 to 8 inches of snow. As of right now, it looks like we might get 1 inch with some of that lake effect down there. But right now, it looks like we're missing out. Again, that's part of the reason it's always so important to stay updated with the weather models every day. They change quickly. Guaranteed, by the time this system actually hits the Midwest, this map will have changed. The question is, how will it have changed? So let's just zoom in and watch this first low pressure system move through the Midwest, because I think this perfectly illustrates what's going on. There's the low pressure system itself, and this is something that I talk about in almost every forecast video because it, for the most part, explains where you're getting rain and where you're getting snow. You have the counterclockwise circulation around this low, so on the southern part, and especially the eastern part, that's where you're bringing in a lot of this warm air and even moisture all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. So that's where you're getting some of that heavy rain. And we saw that on the precipitation maps throughout Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana. That's where we had some of that heavy rain. Now on the left side, you can see those winds are pulling down cold air into Minnesota. Where you see the blue color, that's where you're below freezing. The green and yellow, that's where you're above freezing. So where you're green and yellow, that's where you're getting rain. Where you're blue, that's where you're getting snow. And you can just see how this works. The low pulls down cold air, so right there we're getting our snowfall. It brings up warm air and moisture, so right there we're getting our rainfall. You can actually see that some of that moisture and some of that warm air, you can actually see it with that yellow color streaming all the way up into the Midwest. It almost looks like a highway of wind just pulling that warm air up there. You can also see that it's pulling moisture as well. Where it's brown, that indicates where you have drier air. And then you can see this, again, it's almost like a highway of moisture flowing all the way up into the Midwest, which is allowing this storm to bring some precipitation. Now we noticed the key spot it was bringing that precipitation was Minnesota, and that was the key spot it was bringing the precipitation in the form of snow. So before we look at the local map for Minnesota, I think it might be helpful to also look at the temperature anomalies, because that also almost perfectly goes along with what we were just looking at right here. So where the low bringing that cold air down, bringing the warm air up, you can see how that works on the temperature anomaly map. It almost matches up perfectly right there, where we're still actually above average throughout Minnesota, but a bit more mild than throughout Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio. That's where we're 30 to 35 degrees above average temperatures. So that's where there's no chance you're getting rain, or no chance you're getting snow with that first system, because it's just too warm. If we actually look at the temperatures themselves, it looks like you're in the mid 50s to even the 60s at some points. And I might be getting too into the science behind this, but you can actually see that cold front on this map, where there's almost the barrier between where you're bringing some of that warm air in. You can see that stripping right there where you're still able to bring some of that warm air in. And then on the left side where you're actually pushing that cold air in. Right there is going to be where your cold front is. If you want to see the cold front on this map, you can perfectly see it right there. You think if you're on the right side of that cold front, that's where you're still pulling in that warm air from the Gulf of Mexico. If you're on the left side of that cold front, that's where you're bringing down that cold air from Canada. I might have just got too into the science there, but that's just a perfect graphic to show exactly how this works, because this is a topic that it's one of the first things you learn in Meteorology 101, how those cold fronts and warm fronts work around a low. So as you can see, that's going to affect the precipitation as it comes in. Almost perfectly matching this map and this map, we have this map with the precipitation. That's where you have the colder air, that's where you're getting your snow. Where you have the warmer air and you're pushing in the moisture, that's where you get your heavy rain. So the exact timing of that looks like it's already started as some rain, and then some of that snow starts to build in throughout the day today, working into this evening. That's where we get that defining line where southern parts of Minnesota working into northern Wisconsin are getting the rain, and then northern parts of Minnesota where it's colder getting that snow. As we get into tonight, that's where some more of that cold air is able to flow in, because you think more of Minnesota is now on the left side of that low. That's where the majority of the central to northern parts of the state now just picking up snowfall as that low moves through. And then as we look at the next system, we can see it starts showing up as some heavy snow at about 7 a.m. on Monday. But then remember, by the time it moves farther into the Midwest, it almost just disappears. So seeing what we're getting with that first system, again, 2 to 4 inches in this strip going through Minnesota. For the most part, Wisconsin and the rest of the Midwest missing out. Some areas could be picking up 6 to 8 inches. Then when that next system comes in, remember there's that one period where it's heavy snowfall. Parts of Very southern Minnesota will be getting their totals up to 6 to 10 inches, maybe even this bullseye where we're over a foot. But for the most part, that one is going to be a much quicker storm. It comes in almost in one quick burst and then it's gone. So that's what our totals could look like right there. But again, I say could look like because I guarantee this will look different by the time this storm actually comes in. I purposely saved this for the end of the video because not likely that this is actually going to happen. I shouldn't exactly say that as a weather forecaster, but what I'm saying is the forecast models get more and more confident as we get closer to the actual event, especially with some of these snowfall totals, one of the harder things to forecast. So the closer to the event, we'll just continue to follow this to see where that snowfall ends up going. What we can be sure about is that first strip that's going through the center of the state. That's happening today and tomorrow, so safe bet that that is going to be filling in. So we talked about a lot today, so I'll try to just do a quick forecast summary. Again, we got that first system going up into the Midwest, the one we were just talking about, bringing that snow to upper parts of Minnesota, but mostly rain to much of the Midwest because there's large areas that are 30 to 40 degrees above average. You can see that rain and snow is going to be continuing for California throughout the day today, working into Thursday, before it moves into the center of the country and turns into what looks like it will be a major winter storm. So major winter storm, I consider winter storm when we're talking about snowfall for Wyoming, the western parts of Nebraska, Colorado. There's some areas that confidently, I'm thinking we're getting a foot of snow. I don't think it's out of the question to say we're getting 2 feet of snow in some locations. And in some areas, especially in Nebraska and Wyoming, we might even be able to pick up 3 feet or even more of snow with that one. And then the other part of that is the heavy rain. That's where we're picking up maybe 3 to 5 inches of rain throughout Kansas, into Missouri, parts of Arkansas. So that's going to be a concern when it comes to flooding. We'll also have to keep our eye on severe weather, where there could be some lightning, some hail, some thunderstorms, as that system sits over this region throughout. It first moves in Friday. We'll watch as it first moves in Friday, slowly forms throughout Saturday, Sunday, dropping heavy rain, heavy snow, and then finally moves off before disappearing into the Midwest. So that's what we're going to be following for the rest of this week, and even most likely into the start of next week as well. Looking at one last look at the warnings map, we got those winter storm warnings stretching all the way down through California, where we're still picking up some of that light rain and light snow. Even though it's light, it's falling for the next 2 days, so we're actually able to pick up another foot of snow in the Sierras, a foot of snow down in Southern California, and then another inch of rain along the coast, especially down here in the Central Coast, working down into the Los Angeles and San Diego area. We talked about this red flag warning going from New Mexico all the way into Iowa. That's where there's a combination of a lot of the key wildfire factors. We got 75-degree temperatures, 10% relative humidity, dry fuels, severe drought in some cases, and wind gusts 45 to 50 miles per hour. That's why we have the red flag warning there, and why there is a wildfire threat. Now, the good news is as the storm itself fully moves in over the region, we're going to start to bring in some of that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, and a lot of that fire threat should be diminished. Now, the bad news is, as that starts to bring in the moisture, that's where we start to get the heavy rain and the heavy snow, so we'll have some new concerns to talk about. So I'll continue to look at these every single day and continue to do these forecasts, because there's certainly a lot going on over the next week that we have to stay updated with. Hopefully this video is helpful, and thank you for watching.